Hey, my name's Brian with LupiniBulk.com, and today I'm going to show you how to prepare lupini beans with meal prep in mind specifically. So if you didn't know already, lupini beans are a high protein bean. They have more protein per calorie than soy. They have a ton of soluble and insoluble fiber. They're keto friendly, and if you buy them dry and prepare them yourself, they're really, really affordable. So a lot of reasons to include lupini in your diet, a lot of different diets they could work with. Now, lupini beans are a little bit different texture-wise than most beans. If you think of a pinto bean, a kidney bean, a black bean, those are starchy beans which are mashable, right? You could squish them easily. Lupini beans are a little bit more like edamame, if you've had that. They're firm, so once they come out, they're, not starchy, not mashable. It's a different texture than most beans. The flavor of lupini beans, most people and most things you'll read online, they'll say that it has like a nutty flavor. I think they taste like a really, really mild olive. The reality is that lupini beans, like most beans, don't have a ton of flavor right after you prepare them. It's more about what recipe you're putting them into. So if you want to make pickled lupini beans, they're going to taste like, they're going to have a strong pickled flavor. If you want to make lupini bean pate, the flavor is going to be more of the tahini and the chili powder that you put into it, not so much the nutty flavor. If you want to maintain that nutty flavor, you could do something like a salt brine. So you basically just prepare the lupini beans, put them in salt, and eat them that way, which is a great way of eating them. That's a traditional way of doing it in like Spain and Portugal. That's how they would eat it. But yeah, so if you like that nutty flavor, the idea that it sounds like it would taste like an olive, you can maintain that flavor, or you can use a different recipe that would change the flavor into something maybe you prefer more. Okay, macronutrients on lupini beans is going to be really important for us as we're meal prepping. So if you were to go online, and this is just something I want to point out because it causes some confusion, if you were to go online and look up the macronutrient profile of lupini beans, you're likely to come across two different sets of information and might not be sure which one is accurate. So what you're likely seeing is dried lupini beans versus cooked lupini beans, and the difference, or the reason that they're different is as you cook lupini beans and soak them and prepare them, water leaches carbohydrates out of dried lupini beans, and that's why you end up with this new nutrient profile for cooked and prepared lupini beans. So if you're going to take some new macronutrient profile and put it into MyFitnessPal or your spreadsheet, you're going to want to use the cooked and prepared version, of course. So once you do that, you're going to figure out how many lupini beans you actually want to make. And before we start the recipe, actually, I'll mention that most lupini beans that you buy are going to be bitter lupini beans. And the reason I point that out is to de-bitter the lupini beans, it's going to take 7 days of soaking to get all of the bitterness out. And even if you like the flavor of the bitterness, it's actually not good for you. You need to get rid of all the bitterness. So plan on 7 days to fully prepare lupini beans. There are ways of speeding that up, and I'll talk about some of them as I go through the cooking process. But the typical lupini bean you'll get, again, is a bitter lupini bean, and it's gonna take 7 days to prepare. There are other kinds of lupini beans you could get. There's sweet lupini beans, which have been bred to have less of this bitterness in it. Those you could get done possibly within a day. There's also pre-debittered lupini beans. So someone who's already done some of this preparation work, re-dried the beans, and that's what you have. Those are gonna take a lot less time to prepare too. Both of those kinds are gonna be more expensive and harder to find. So if you're not sure what kind of lupini bean you have, you just got them off Amazon or something, you probably have bitter lupini beans unless it specifically says sweet or debittered. Okay, so we know how many lupini beans we're gonna wanna eat in total. We know it's gonna take us about 7 days. So if today is Sunday, this is our meal prep day, we would be doing this cooking today. You wouldn't be able to use it this week, you'd be using it the week after, hopefully that makes sense. So, okay, so let's say we want to make 7 prepared cups of lupini beans. We're gonna eat 1 cup of lupini beans per day. We then have to divide that 7 cups by 2 to figure out how many dry lupinis we're gonna put into our pot. The beans are gonna expand as we cook them. So you take 7, divide it by 2, you're gonna get 3.5 cups of beans that we're gonna put into the pot. That will yield us actually a little bit more than 7 cups. If you want to be really exact, you could divide by 2.25 and you'll end up with just about exactly as much as you need. The reason I divide by 2 and recommend it is you don't want to go through a 7-day preparation process and then for some reason you don't have enough on the 7th day. I'd rather throw some beans out or take them aside and pickle them and store them, and pickled lupini beans will last for a really long time. So I recommend dividing by 2. You could do 2.25 and we could get started. The last thing I'll say before actually starting to cook is you don't need much to prepare them. I've got a stirring stick. You actually don't even really need to stir that much because these beans don't really stick to the sides of the pot or each other. They kind of just float around and they just behave a lot more nicely than other kinds of beans. You need a pot that's big enough. I would say that if you want to make, for me, 7 cups of prepared lupini, you're going to want a pot that's at least 3 times as large as that, which gives you enough room to put some water, and it gives additional room for the boiling water to expand and bubble up and do those things. You need a strainer. I have a built-in strainer, which is really nice for lupini beans, but it doesn't really matter what strainer you use. You need a measuring cup, and that's pretty much it. I have some salt here, so I'll go ahead and salt the lupini beans to kind of do a little bit of a recipe in this video, but again, I'll focus on just the preparation. And if you are looking for where to get lupini beans, we sell them at lupinibulk.com. So let me get started. I'm gonna put 3.5 cups of lupini beans into this pot, and then we'll do our first step, which is to boil them. Okay, so put your stove on high with some water in the pot with the lupinis. Get it to a nice boil like this, and only after you get it to this nice boil, start a timer, and we'll do 2.5 hours of boiling for bitter lupini. If you have previously debittered lupini, you could get away with less, maybe about 2 hours. But for sweet lupini and bitter lupini, you'll do 2.5 hours boiling. You may run out of water, in which case simply add some water. That may stop the boil momentarily. You see it kind of died down a little bit. Not a big deal. Don't throw ice water in there or something, but just throw regular water and don't worry about it. You may see some foam start to build up at some point. You can stir it in that case to kind of keep the foam from burning on to the sides of the pot, which makes it hard to clean. But really, these guys are not going to stick to each other. They're not going to stick to the side of the pot. And so you don't have to stir too much, but keep an eye on it, mostly for the water level to drop too much. Make sure that you keep adding water in so that the beans are always have enough water to be boiled. Here's a bit of a visual of how the lupini beans go through the cooking process. You start with very dry beans. They start to plump up. You can see they get bigger, they get a lot of color, and then what you want to end up with is something more like this, and that's a comparison versus the dry bean. So that's what you're looking for. Just go for 2.5 hours. It'll end up looking like this. Okay, so now we're done cooking. We've let the pot cool off, and from here, you got to think about what kind of lupini beans you had one more time. If you had sweet or pre-debittered lupini, you could actually right now take one of the lupini out, taste test it, see if it's bitter at all. If it's not bitter at all, you're ready to use those lupini beans in whatever recipe you were planning on doing. If they are bitter, then you're gonna have to go through this soaking process that I'm gonna describe next. For bitter lupinis, what we had, what most people have, you're definitely going to have to go through this soaking process. Now it does take a while, but the good news is it's really, really simple. All you have to do is do a number of water replacements. So just strain out the lupini beans. This is where the built-in strainer comes in handy. Take this, what I'll call old water, dump it out, refill with fresh water, and then put the lupini beans back in it. So you'll call that one replacement, and you'll do that every day for about a week. Try to aim for the same time every day. So don't do it today at 6 p.m. and then tomorrow at 6 a.m. Try to do it around 6 p.m. every day. Don't stress too much about the exact timing. Some things you can do to speed this up if you want to. You could add more water to the amount of beans that you have. So I'll put a table up on the screen that shows you a rough relationship of how quickly you could get through debittering the Lupini beans based on how much water you put in. Another thing you can do to speed things up is actually to just replace it more frequently. The reason I recommend once a day is that usually people meal prep once a day on like Sunday. So there's really no point in, you know, getting this done on Wednesday. You might as well just change it once a day, and as long as you put in enough water, it's not really even that much water, but enough water, you'll be able to get it done well before that 7-day mark. One other thing I'll mention about soaking is some people like to store the beans in the refrigerator while they're soaking. You can do that. It will slow down the debittering process by just a little bit. So if you're gonna do that, add more water. The traditional way is to just leave this out at room temperature. So that is a way that people do it as well. So with all that information, you could probably put together a plan of how you want to debitter your Lupini beans. The goal is just to do this for 7 days. And once you're done, you can give one of them a test, make sure that they're not bitter. And if they're not, then you're good to go and start using them in a recipe. Of course, if they are bitter, you can always just soak longer. So hopefully all that gives you enough information to be able to debitter your Lupini beans. Now, for those of you, if it's your first time eating Lupini beans, I'll show you just a couple of things. You'll see that there's kind of this outer skin, which you can kind of pop off. Some people like to eat just the meat part of the Lupini beans. Some people eat the skin. A lot of fiber in the skin. Most of the protein and things are in the meat of the Lupini bean. So either way works. When you're testing it for bitterness, yeah, I don't think it really matters. Probably just to be safe, eat the whole thing or like pop the whole thing in your mouth and test it. That's fine. And then just kind of something fun is if you hold it like this with this little hole shooting out, you can kind of like pop them out, and it's sort of fun. So people like to do this and then shoot the Lupini into their mouth and catch it. It's just kind of like a fun game. Okay, so in addition to preparation, I did say that I would add in one simple recipe. So a really popular thing to do with Lupini beans is to make, in Portugal they would call it tremoços, but it's basically salt-brined Lupini beans. All you have to do is on the 6th and 7th day, add salt to the water that you're soaking the Lupini beans in. That's pretty much it. A lot of recipes will call for a lot of salt, so you can, adjust this up or down as you like, but most traditional recipes would call for about a tablespoon of salt per 4 cups of water that you're soaking the Lupinis in. That's kind of the minimum, actually. It goes up from there. Now, not all of that salt would get absorbed by the Lupini beans, but a lot of it would, and that's a pretty large amount of salt. So, adjust it to your taste and your goals and things like that, but that's pretty much all you have to do. The salt absorbs into the beans. They taste really good afterwards. Some people would jar that with some garlic or some other kinds of herbs, but that's pretty much all you do. So I thought I would mention it during the preparation stage instead of making a whole new video on it. One last recommendation that I could make is once you've completely debittered your Lupini beans, to go back and do one last 2-minute long boil. The reason for that is some pathogens may have grown over the last week while you've been soaking, and doing one last 2-minute boil will help preserve your Lupini beans, just make them last longer. This wouldn't be so important if your recipe calls for additional cooking at the end, so roasted Lupinis, this is kind of meaningless. But if you're just gonna do salt brined or tremoços, for example, you could do one last 2-minute boil, and then you could take those Lupini beans out and put them in your meal prep box or put them in a cute little mason jar and stick them in the refrigerator. They'll last for a few weeks. All right, you've made it to the end of the video, which means congratulations, you either have prepared Lupini or salt brined Lupini. If you're looking for those other recipes, pickled Lupini, pate, roasted Lupini, we do a lot of Lupini here, as you might have guessed. Please subscribe, I'll be coming out with those videos soon, but for now, I really appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.